Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal, and the War Within pre-patch actually saw a pretty sizable update recently, which brought in a ton of different class changes, from some buffs to some nerfs, but also some of the more quality of life and cosmetic changes for a specific class that is being the class of Hunter. Now, there's always a couple of ways you can customize your character, from the various transmogs you run to the different talents in your loadout, but Hunters can also pick what type of animal companion gets to join them on their journey. And a couple of new pets have been made tameable as of this recent pre-patch update, with a bunch of Battle for Azeroth pets or creatures now available to be tamed as your hunter's companion. This includes raid bosses, this includes dungeon bosses, as well as a variety of different unique creatures that can only be found on islands. Some of these are really easy to get through, and we'll cover those immediately. And then there's a few that are mostly based with island expeditions. They're going to be a bit of a grind and a bit of RNG, but definitely have some of the more unique looks that can be added to your collection. Right before this guide though, however, if you guys want to see more regular War Within updates like these, especially with the expansion launching so soon, be sure to follow the channel and subscribe for more guides. Otherwise, let's dive right in. So a bunch of new pets have been now made tameable as of the recent pre-patch update. And first I want to go over some of the easier to obtain pets, and then go over some of the ones you will have to do a bit of farming. And now all of these pets are unique to some degree, or at least they are kind of unique in their own way. A lot of those fun pets, the good ones, can be found in dungeons as well as raids, all primarily centered around Battle for Azeroth expansion. One of the more exciting ones in my opinion is going to be Rezan from Dalaran, one of the fan favorite dungeons, and this guy is really easy to get. All you have to do is walk through the gates of Dalaran, go down to where Rezan passes around his I guess lair, if you want to call it, and then tame him. But all you have to do is make sure that you have undead taming enabled for your hunter, or rather learned. And to do that, you need to find a tome that teaches you how to tame undead pets. There's a good chance you actually might have found this tome already, and in the description of this video I have a couple of different scripts that can actually give you some information whether you can tame these pets or not. For example, if I type it into the chat and we actually get to see the screen, I type in a script and it basically spits out to me which types of pets can my character tame. Undeads, yes. Gargon, no. Cloud Serpent, no. And Blood Beast, no. I will have both of these scripts available in the description so you can find all different types of pets that your character has access to, because there's a good chance you've already picked up the tome and your character immediately learns it as soon as you acquire the tome. So there's a good chance you don't need to do any farming in order to tame Rezan. However, if you do need to tame an undead but you can't tame undeads, if you're not an undead character yourself who can natively tame undead creatures, you'll need to then find a tome by slaying undead creatures. And the best place is to go to Shadowlands, go to Maldraxxus, and run the Theater of Pain or the Plagueful dungeons, because they're filled with undead creatures, and eventually one of them should hopefully drop you the tome, so the farm for it shouldn't take all that long. But once you get the actual tome, then now you can tame Rezan. Rezan is a devil source, so he can only be acquired by players of the Beast Mastery Hunter spec, because only they can tame him and only they can utilize them. But as for Rezan himself, he's not actually that much more unique than Devourer specifically. He has a Monster's Bite, which is a Mortal Strike effect, a Normal Bite, a Self-Heal, as well as a Bloodlust and Leech effect. So he's actually a fairly decent pet to pick up for the War Within. Now, another pet that you can obtain actually fairly easily right next to the Dalaran dungeon is in another dungeon called King's Rest. The final boss of that dungeon actually has two pets for you to tame. One of them, Rabban, which is the very first Raptor that the final boss of that instance summons. This Raptor has been tameable long ago, so if you haven't picked him up already, you could tame him immediately. But he summons the second Raptor that the boss actually mounts up. This mount has a saddle and everything. In fact, it is exactly the same model of the mount that you can obtain from the actual that version of the dungeon on Mythic difficulty. So you might as well run that place on Mythic just in case it drops the mount. Otherwise, you'll be able to get yourself a pet that has a saddle that looks just like the mount. It has a very unique appearance to it. It is also an undead type of pet, so you will need to get the tome in order to be able to tame this undead specifically. Now, as of this update, two more raid bosses have been made available for taming as well. The first one is going to be from Battle of Dalaran, which is Grong. Depending if you do him on Alliance or Horde, you actually get a different version of Grong. Horde players in the Horde version of that instance will see this boss as a second boss of the raid, and you will get the lively, the alive, the healthy version of Grong, which is a ferocity beast, a gorilla type with a nice defensive ability of Silverback, which may actually actually be useful if you're looking for a takey pet that you want to take into Delves in the War Within expansion. Now, I did mention that Alliance and Horde actually get a different version of this type of pet or this type of boss that you can then convert into a pet. This is because Alliance actually get a different version of Grong called Grong the Revenant, the undead but a risen undead version of that same boss that then Alliance have to fight against. This one is very similar to Grong in terms of movement, in terms of its animation, but an obviously different appearance. It is an undead version of that same boss that also has a unique eye glow to it that's very noticeable. This is an undead version of the pet, however, so like for Rezan, like for the King's Rest pet, you'll need to make sure to have the Tome of Undead learned on your hunter in order to be able to tame this version. Now, I have not been able to find a way to get a Horde character into the Alliance version of this instance or an Alliance character into the Horde version of the instance to be able to tame both versions of this boss slash pet. But if somebody in the comments does have a way to be able to get somebody of the opposite faction into the Alliance version or into the Horde version at a whim, let them know in the comments below, because if you can get both versions of this pet, that would be great. It ends up expanding on your overall collection. But for now, I have not been able to get two different versions, but it is definitely one of the more unique looking pets available as of this build. Now, another boss style of pet that can now be tamed from the era of Battle for Azeroth is actually the Fetid Devourer from the raid of Uldir. This is like a Loa Chimera type of pet or type of beast that is also corrupted with the blood of Gahoon that has now created this massive amalgamation that's actually very highly detailed and definitely has a very unique look when it comes to some of the other chimeras. This is a tenacity pet compared to some of the other pets which are more bloodlust pet. This one has a defensive ability of Fortitude of the Bear, but also a nice mortal check effect which is highly useful in PvP, but also a very unique appearance. And this one you get from any version, any difficulty of the Uldir raid instance from Battle for Azeroth. Now, the next few pets that you can obtain from the new update all come from the island expeditions, though those are going to be a little bit harder to get because you don't just go into a raid or a dungeon and tame them immediately. Instead, you have to find the right version of that pet, then you can tame it, and they're a little bit harder to come by. In my almost 3 hours of farming, I've only seen 5 versions of some of these pets, or at least the tameable versions of them, because there's a lot of non-tameable versions, so it just basically becomes a little bit of a grind to collect them. Some of these pets are going to be a slightly familiar but a bit of a unique version, like a Ripshred, for example, or specifically this type of a maned wolf. Maned wolves are not uncommon to World of Warcraft, but there are specific maned wolves that can be found on islands that have these bands around their legs, paws, as well as their tail, which is a bit of a unique touch that some of the other wolves don't. They don't have any special abilities compared to other wolves, just a unique look. And there's a couple of different variations, like this gray with red, then there's also this dark with purple, there's a white fur with blue, and there's like I think 6 different variations of these wolves that you can get, but also some of the different fur variations as well, where the fur has a bit of a different highlight to it that definitely looks unique and definitely can be added to your collection. Those are a little bit harder to come by because there's a lot of wolves. Some of them have bindings, but only a handful of them can be tamed through islands. And we'll talk about islands here in a little bit in terms of some of the farming strategies for islands, but first let's get through some of the other available pets. Like a different type of a crab, like Fathomclaw, which is kind of like got a dark blue and green look to it. It's a little bit different than some of the other crab pets available, mostly in its shell or exoskeleton, whichever way we want to go about it. But the actual blue markings that go all across its back, those are a little bit unique compared to some of the other crabs. Then there's another version called the Abyss Crawler, also obtainable through dungeons, which has more of a blue tinged maroon look to it, which is quite unique on its own. Finally, we have what I think is probably the most rare pet that took me forever to farm up, which is actually Bog Belcher, or rather what they're called lovingly in the hunter community as kind of like the Loa Frog Pets. Now, some of these Loa frogs have actually been made into mounts way back in Battle for Azeroth, but you can only obtain them through a bit of a gold sink for 333,333 gold in the zone of Nazmir. But in the past, these frogs were only rideable as mounts, but not tameable as pets. And this update made them finally tameable, and there's 3 variations. There's the yellow version, a green version, and a blue version. The yellow version will come as a bog belcher in islands, only a specific rare that I've only seen once in my 3 hours of farming. The blue one is Thundercroak, also one of the rares that can spawn in island expeditions. The green one should be a little bit easier to get because there's a bunch of different variations that are not rares. There's the man-eater frogs, the toxin belly croakers, as well as colossal spadefoots. So there's a couple of different variations of the green version specifically, but these only drop on very, very specific island expeditions, and this is where the grind for the island pets really comes from, is the way that island expeditions work. If you head over to the island expedition map, you'll actually notice when you click the map, it'll actually show you which islands are available for this week in the rotation. This week we have the Whispering Reef, Crestfall, as well as Havenswood. And the problem is some of these pets only drop or can only be found, or more commonly found, on only certain islands. Like for example, Crestfall is a decent place where you can get a bunch of the green frogs. However, a much better island to obtain the green version of this Loa frog will actually be the Ongol Ruins. So you can try to get them in Whispering Reef, Crestfall, and Havenswood. It took me 3 hours just to get the yellow variation to finally spawn, because every time you do an island, it's a randomization of what creatures are going to be on the island with obvious theme, like the Maracoa crab things in the Whispering Reef, or the bunch of Worgen over in Havenswood, or pirates all around Crestfall. Those will be always found within those islands, but then all the other creatures are a little bit more randomized, as well as some of the invading creatures as well, which are randomized with every single island expedition. Now, I will leave you guys with all the research that I used in order to find these pets myself, so all of those links will be available in the description of this video. Specifically, I'll have the links for the frogs, which I think are some of the more rarer pets for me to find for my hunter to tame. But the wolves, they were not as bad. The crabs seem to appear once in a while, at least the Fathom Claw seem to appear quite often compared to everything else, but the frogs in particular are really rare, and there's a couple of different strategies of how you can approach it. Technically, every time you run an island, it randomizes all of the different creatures and rares on that island, so you could technically farm them infinitely until you get the best combination, where you can get the blue frog, the green frog, the yellow frog, the types of wolves, as well as the crabs, all to spawn at some point throughout your farm. Or you could wait until the right map that has higher chances of those specific pets to spawn, and then farm out islands looking for those pets specifically, but that may take a couple of weeks worth of rotations of these island maps in order to get the combination that you're looking for, in order to have an easier time farming up some of those pets. However, there's also still a bit of a bonus when it comes to doing islands. If you've never done it back in BFA, there's a bunch of different rewards you could obtain from islands, from unique transmogs, pets, and even mounts, and you get this currency of doubloons, which can then be traded into essentially island loot boxes, which contain a random assortment of items based on the different themes of those islands. So if you had certain types of enemies like dragons, or the void, or pirates invading it, that means certain thematic creatures can actually have different rewards, and I was able to get roughly like 2 mounts just from trading all of my doubloons that I was able to farm up from the islands. You can do these islands to fully complete them just to get the doubloons so you can get more collectibles, or you can just farm them for pets, run in, see if those types of pets are available to tame. If they're not, back out, refresh, run back in. So it's kind of like, it's almost like playing Diablo, but in WoW. You kind of just refreshing the map over and over and over, but it can give you a couple of different things that you can kind of keep farming for and earn collectibles for, while primarily focusing on all the pets. But yeah, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. The island grind for these pets definitely was a bit of a grind with a ton of RNG, unless you're playing for the right specific maps. But with that, that's going to be the entire guide of how to get all of the new tameable pets on your hunter during the pre-patch for the 11.02 update. As always, I do want to thank all of you guys so much for watching this video, and I hope all of you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it or found it informative, go ahead and give it a like. I would very much appreciate it. Join our Discord community. Link to that is in the description of every single one of these videos. Would love to see you guys join part of the Discord community in preparation to the War Within expansion. As always, let me know all your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll see all of you guys in the next one.